Hello and welcome to a gameplay for all seasons. Today we're talking about Hogwarts Legacy and the good/evil spectrum that I'm very much hoping they have in this game. Now, you'll notice that I am playing the Hogwarts Legacy trailer as I speak. The reason I'm doing that is for two reasons. Firstly, because it's interesting, and the second reason being that there is one particular scene that I have noticed something very recently in, and I want you to have a look at it as well. So look out for the scene where they're standing in the courtyard and someone puts their hand out and the broomstick just shoots up into that person's hand. Now, I've noticed something about that. Have a look at that as well, and right at the end of this video, it's not related to the good evil spectrum thing, so I'll leave it right to the end. We can discuss it and we'll see if you saw the same thing that I did. Okay, so back to the purpose of this video, the good evil spectrum. Now, if you are a return viewer to this channel, you'll know that we have touched on a good evil spectrum before. It's something that I quite passionately hope we have in the game. So what am I talking about when I say the good evil spectrum? I'm talking about the fact that I very much hope in this game. We know that this game is going to be flexible. We know this game is going to let you have your own path. In reality, what that means, we may not know quite yet, but I'm hopeful. What it means is, unlike some games that have come before, where you can either be good or you be evil, and whether you are very slightly good or very slightly evil means at the end of the game you get a very different ending, which personally I find that frustrating, because sometimes you just happen to be a little bit evil, happen to be a little bit good, and then right at the end you turn into some heroic version of good or some terrible version of evil, and they either go off the deep end or they're just as fantastic can be. And for me, that digital, you're either one or the other, can ruin the ending of games. I spoke about a specific example on this channel before. I won't mention it again for those who have already heard it, but that's not what I want to see in the game. What I want to see in the game, I want to see those shades of grey in the middle. I want to see your ability just to kind of be a neutral person, or the ability to be someone who is kind of good, but maybe you have a bit of a temper, or maybe you're kind of evil, but you have some redemption qualities within you. And in reality, what that would be quite nice is if at the end that affected the storyline. Maybe get different endings there. Maybe it's the way people treat you. Maybe it's options available to you. And maybe, you know, it's not just if you're really, really evil or really, really good, you get better things. I mean, in a way, Infamous was a bit like that. So if you were really, really evil, you got really good abilities. If you were really, really good, then you got other good abilities as well. But if you were somewhere in the middle, you tended not to get that great stuff. What I hope is that is a place that you can legitimately be, somewhere in the middle. So I hope they appreciate that. And as I say, a spectrum where you're anywhere in the middle. Maybe there's 5 marks of where you can be. You can be good, you can be middle, you can be slightly good, etc., etc. Then that would be good if people treat you in a slightly different way. But the reason I want to retouch on this in this video is because there has actually been a few comments onto videos recently of mine where people have slightly more elaborated on this, and in a way it's very easy just to say, oh, I want all these different levels of good to evil. However, how do you really get there? So there's one obvious way that you could get there, which is through dialogue. Now, in some games, you get very obvious dialogue, which means you're either good or you're evil. Coming up with some ridiculous example, you got the situation where someone might ask you for a mission. Please come and help me. I've got this very valuable thing. You need to do X with it. You come along and you say, no, I have that myself. Obviously, that's the evil one. Or you say, don't worry, I'll help you no matter what it is. That's a good one. And then you have, oh, I'll come back and rescue you later, which is obviously you can do a bit later. And what I think would be quite good, rather than have those really obvious, I'm being good, I'm being bad, maybe you just have something in the middle, which is like, yeah, I'll help you do something, but in return, I want you to do something for me. Or maybe it's even more hidden than that. So you get different options, but it's not obvious which are the good or the bad, and maybe there are just neutral ones in the middle. That's really what I'd want to see from dialogue. Now, it isn't just dialogue, although that's the obvious thing and a big thing that games use, but I think there's other areas where you can do it as well. So for example, maybe the way you approach missions. So again, coming up with some theoretical mission where maybe you have to go, there's nifflers running all around Hogwarts or something, and you've got to sort that problem out. Now, maybe there's different ways you can do that. You can either go out and exterminate them, or you can go around and you can catch them and release them somewhere else. And maybe it's a bit harder, because we all know that to be on the good path theoretically should be harder. So to go and just exterminate them with some spell, maybe that's obviously the evil, maybe that's the easy thing. But maybe you have to go out of your way a bit more to get traps. Maybe that costs you a bit of money, and you have to go out there and you have to catch them and release them. Maybe you don't catch all of them, you don't exterminate all of them, but again, somewhere you go in between determines where you are on that spectrum. So things like that. There's lots of different ways you can do it. So there are ways that you can get there and end up in the middle ground. And again, it's not just dialogue around missions. Going back to the dialogue, it could be interactions just with people. So maybe you have a student and it's just the way you interact with them. Maybe it's the banter you have with them. Maybe people just come to you to talk to you about issues that they have that aren't really missions, but the way you interact with them. Are you sarcastic? Are you friendly? Are you plain mean to them? All these things can very much lead to where you end up on that spectrum. And obviously it's a combination of all these things added together. And to answer a very specific question I got on one of my recent videos, my thoughts are they'd be very, very nice to have different choices which aren't obvious which side of morality they sit and can have different consequences based off of that. Now, one of my absolute favourite systems was the butterfly effect on Until Dawn. I love the way that little things happen. You didn't really know what that was going to mean later on, but it gave a different ending. And in that case, being a horror game, it meant different characters might survive or they might not. And I think every single game could do well for having that system because it changes the ending, it changes the interactions, and it gives a fantastic replayability factor to the game. So let's hit on that second point that I wanted to talk about that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, which is unrelated to the good and evil spectrum. And in fact, before I do, let me remind you to quickly hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, to make sure you don't miss out on any other Hogwarts Legacy videos that will be coming up. So the scene in the courtyard, it's about a minute through the trailer when the person holds out the hand, the broom zooms up to him. Now, the reason I found that so interesting when I watched it recently, just before that scene ends, in my head I had it that person just holds out the hand, the broom shoots up and the scene ends. Well, actually that's not quite what happens, because they hold out the hand, the broom zooms up, and then they actually straddle it. They actually get on the broomstick, which the reason I find that absolutely fascinating is there is so many questions out there at the moment which are saying, will you be able to fly a broomstick? Well, why would you have that scene in there where in the middle of the courtyard the person sits on a broomstick? They're obviously about to fly it. So to me, that tells me they probably are going to have the ability to fly around the broomstick, which I think is quite a big thing. Not big enough for its own video, but I think it is a big thing. So if you stayed around for this, there's your little bonus fact. Hope you enjoyed this. See you on the next one.